Do you ever have those days where you set yourself the task or intention or to-do list item of writing an email to the people on your list, writing an email to promote your coaching offer, and your brain just doesn't want to? If you're anything like me, this is usually like the default response to the intention of writing an email to your list. But I have two wonderful pieces of news for you. Number one, if this does happen to you, congratulations, you are a human with a human brain that is just braining. And number two, there is a process that you can guide yourself through to get back into that place where you do want to write that email without having to rely on willpower or forcing yourself or white knuckling your way through to getting it done. That's why in this video, I'm going to share with you my 11-step process to writing emails when you really just don't feel like writing them. Here we go. Step 1. I realize the reason that I don't want to write is because of a thought that my brain is having. This is step 1. That realization that all of this resistance and uptightness is coming from a thought in my brain. Step 1 doesn't require figuring out what that thought is. That's step 2. But starting here and realizing that my brain is going to be thinking thoughts, whether I'm conscious to them, whether they're in my awareness or not. And those thoughts create feelings in my body. So this first step of realizing that the only problem here is that there's a thought that's going unchecked in my brain, this is really essential, and that is why it's step 1. Moving on to step 2, getting clear on what specifically that thought is. Now, you might think, oh, it's so simple. It's just, I don't feel like writing. That's what the sentence is. But we need to do a little bit more digging than that, because that's the surface level thought, right? But there's a deeper one there. That's actually the cause of this tension and uptightness and resistance to sitting down and wanting to write. The question I ask myself to get clear on what that thought is really simple. Are you ready for it? That question is why. So if I'm thinking, I don't feel like writing, I don't want to write this email, I don't want to do this, I ask myself why, and then I write down my response to that. I just brain dump and I take all of the reasons that my brain gives me to why I don't want to write, and I put it on paper in the most messy, unedited way possible, and then I can see my brain in front of me. Once you can see your brain in front of you on the paper, you can move on to step number 3, which is identifying what that thought is. So more often than not, for me, that thought is some flavor or version of the belief or thought that whoever's going to read this is going to judge me. This is just such a common one that my brain throws at me. And I know it's kind of just part of the human condition, right? Like our brain, our humanness is designed to protect us from judgment, because in the past, if you were judged and you were ostracized and you were kicked out, that was the difference between life and death. But once you have clarity on what that particular sentence in your brain is, you can move on to step number 4. In step number 4, you get clear on what feeling that specific thought that you've highlighted actually creates in your body. And this is related to this concept that your thoughts create your feelings. Now, you might not know this. Maybe this is the first time you've heard it, or maybe this is a key part of the coaching you do with your clients and it's old news to you. Either way, it's such an important part of this process, right? Once you've gotten clear on what that thought is, it's time to ask yourself, what feeling does that create in my body when I think that thought? So for me, it's that thought of the people who read this will judge me. And by getting curious about what feeling that creates, I can tell that it's quite simple, quite obvious, quite plain. It's fear. That's it. It's just fear. And maybe for you, it's something different, right? Like, especially if you have a different thought and you're not worried so much that people are going to judge you, but you're worried that there's no point to this anyway, then maybe the feeling is something like frustration. But getting clear on what that feeling is, that is all we're doing in step 4. Yeah, step 5. This is just a fun extra step that I created because it's honestly part of my process. There is a part of my brain that in this step just wants to lament at how repetitive my brain is about this particular thought-feeling combo. Again and again, I will sit down to write an email, and again, my brain will tell me that people will judge me and I will feel fear, and that will create a lot of resistance and all of those things. And I get so tired of it throwing the same code, right? Like it's a frustrating thing. So step 5 is just about lamenting that I have a human brain that is still telling me this same thought and feeling that I've come up against so many times before. So that brings us to step number 6, where I catch myself beating myself up a bit for having a human experience. And I take a hot second to stop judging myself. So step 6, take a second to stop judging yourself for having the human experience that you're having. All right, step number 7. Once I am no longer preoccupied with beating myself up for having the thought that I'm having and feeling the way that I'm feeling, that's when I actually can open myself up to curiosity and compassion for this thought that my brain is throwing at me, right? This thought that the people who read this are going to judge me. So when I'm in this space of curiosity and compassion, that's when I have the opportunity to start unfurling and pulling at the threads of this thought that people will judge me. And I can ask myself questions like, what is it specifically that you're worried they'll judge you for or about? And so what if that's true? Why is it a problem if they think that? And even questions like, who aren't you thinking of when you're too busy thinking of the people out there who may or may not judge you? Okay, step number 8. At this point of that self-coaching and that self-inquiry and that curiosity and compassion, I usually manage to find just the slightest release of that attachment and tightness to that thought error of people will judge me. The people who read this will judge me. And at the slightest unfurl of that, like I don't need that entire thought to go away, but just releasing it a little bit is enough usually for me to find that 1 ounce of desire to write. And I take that and I run with it. And that brings me to step number 9, which is where I open what I want to write in. Usually for me, it is the website 750words.com. I love the clean interface of that, but for you, it might be your notes app, it might be a Google Doc, it might be an email you write to yourself in your Gmail browser, whatever it is. Open that up and start writing. But whatever you do at this step, do not edit as you write. Let it be the messy brain dump. Let yourself just get everything out of your brain as quickly as you can without trying to make it better. That's coming next. Okay, we're almost there. Step 10. Once I've done that brain dump, once I've gotten the thoughts out of my head, even if it's messy, even if I can't see the paragraph structure or anything like that, it doesn't matter. Once that is done, I take a time out. I go for a walk. I go cuddle my puppies. I go hug my baby. I go get a drink of water. I go take a loo break. Whatever it is, I take the step away from the computer, from my notes app, from wherever I was writing, and I let my brain just have a little bit of space from it all. Because then step number 11 is where I edit and then send the email. The value of writing first and editing later and not trying to do the two at the same time will just make a world of difference to, number 1, how quickly you do get emails finished, and number 2, how much you enjoy the actual writing process. Because when you separate out writing and editing, it means that judgmental part of your brain that's required for editing to critique and see where to put this and how to make this better, when you can leave that for that last stage rather than when you're in the creative process of getting the ideas out on paper, it's just going to be way more of a fun time. And at the end of the day, you are going to have such a different relationship with writing because you actually enjoy the process without reinforcing that judgmental voice while you're writing. Separate out the two and put editing where it belongs at the end. Once you've done that, there you go. Your email is written, it's sent, and you've lived another day whilst completing that task of writing an email to your list. Congratulations. Now, if you're keen to make writing your emails feel easier and lighter and quicker than how they currently feel, then be sure to check out my free resource, 7 Speedy Email Secrets. You'll find it linked in the video description below.